What's up, guys? It's me, Rivah. I'm back again with another video. If you're new here, my name is Rivah. I'm here to give you guys my full thoughts, my feelings, my opinions, and of course, my reaction to this video. I had this video sent to me on my Instagram DM, which is at RIVAH_JORDON. And I realized that this must have been like from a vault somewhere because this video is very, very old. But this was a request for me to do this reaction based off of the very big changes that are going on nowadays when it comes to baby deletion laws and stuff like that. So I'm very intrigued on how this conversation is going to go and everything that is going to be talked about between Candace Owens and Hafiz. So we're just going to go ahead and jump right into the video.
Absence.
Yes.
Everything that happens is secondary to that. Like, it all falls apart once you remove fathers from the home. And I talk about that often, and actually Barack Obama spoke about this. He gave a Father's Day speech.
Yes.
And he started talking about all the statistics of what happens when you remove a father from the home. One simple thing: remove a father from the home, and a child is 9 times more likely to end up in prison, 6 times more likely to drop out of school. 12 times more likely to end up in prison, 9 times more likely to drop out of school, 6 times more likely to lead a life of poverty, right? One single element. And there are actually policies that since the 1960s have incentivized that for Black America. That's when everything fell apart for Black Americans. Our families were together, kids were performing better. I mean, in every statistic, Black Americans were doing better. Think about this, under Jim Crow laws, right, than they are doing today. Now, nobody would say America has become a more racist society since Jim Crow laws. If they did, they'd be disingenuous and they'd be lying to you, right? So what happened? Well, you tore apart our families, and you turned us into a culture of baby mamas, which is now reflected in our music. So when I talk about Black culture and I say things that need to be changed, our music has taken it.
So before we go into that, because I think she's talking like at a kind of like a faster rate, and I don't want to miss anything that she's saying. I promise I won't pause this video too much. But firstly, you know, being that a lot of the women relied on the men more in that time, this goes to another video that I did where it's more of like they didn't really have any other options. So the sad thing is that as women have grown in society, when it comes to more opportunities, more job opportunities, financial opportunities, they have kind of just like neglected their counterpart, right? So it's kind of been like, I can do this all by myself anyway. I don't need you anyway. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to get more assistance if I don't have a man in the home. So even if you wanted to be around, I'm going to push you out so that I can be better off by myself with my child. So it's a very unfortunate thing. So there is a difference. There definitely is a difference.
So I personally believe that the 60s. Did you watch the show Mad Men?
I didn't watch it, but I know what it's about.
Okay, so Mad Men, I love this show because it's basically a story of an ad company from the 50s and 60s. And I love this show because it shows a cultural revolution that happened in America in the 60s. And you really walk through and see how the world changed in the 60s. I would love to have a show like that for Black America, to show people like really what went on in the 60s. Because like you said, I think most people go to the 60s, right, as this era where Black progress was going on its upward.
It was.
And then all of a sudden, 70s, 80s, we see a downward spiral in a lot of different areas. While welfare is a variable, because I believe it was a multi-variable equation which caused these issues. While welfare is a variable, I think there's other variables that we're not talking about as well that contributed to the breakdown of the Black families.
Fear.
And so one of the things, fear is definitely one. One of the things is, so many people quote the 25% of Black women in the 1960s who were single mothers, right? And they said the number went from 23, 25, whatever number you believe, to about 70 to 75 today. Is that fair to say? But most people don't realize that 23, 25% in the 60s was still extremely high.
Well, they said it was extremely high because at that time, family was valued all across America.
Exactly.
It was all about the family.
Exactly.
You're talking about Patrick Moynihan's report, and they said we've got a problem here.
Exactly.
Like, yeah, it was considered high.
Exactly. So, because in the white community, the rate was 3%, right? So what's interesting is in the Black community, the rate went from 25% to 75%,
Mm-hmm.
a 300% increase. And then the white community went from 3% to today about 30%, which is a 1,000%
Yeah, but
increase.
way less than ours.
Yes. But percentage wise, obviously, when you get to higher tiers, it's difficult to grow faster, right?
But I think just to add to his point really quick, I think that one of the reasons why in our community there's going to always be that margin is because we have to also remember that like even our men were not seen as people, so there's a lot of other things at play that occurred as to why a lot of women ended up in single parent households with even within that time. I mean, we're talking about like army and war, you know, the corrections facilities. There's so many different reasons as to why, but if we're looking at it now, like we would say 20 something percent compared to like she's 70%. I mean, that's there's a huge difference.
It's way easier to go from 2% to 4% than from 40% to 80%, right? But at the same time,
we did it.
we still went up.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that's really fascinating is that the single motherhood rate was high in the black community in the 60s. So sometimes I feel as though we're painting, just my personal opinion, a disingenuous image of the 1960s as this utopian ideal time in black America when there was a bunch of issues still going on.
Yeah, but 23% versus 77%.
No,
it's like, yeah, I mean,
it's gotten worse. I think it's fair to say it's gotten worse, but like I was saying,
way worse. I mean, we're talking about it's increased threefold.
Of course.
Right? I mean, that's not like it just got a little bit worse. This is like this went from like an issue that needed to be addressed at 23%, which I do still believe is high, right? Mm-hmm. But 23% and 77%. You can't even talk about these two things the same, right? Now, because now you're talking about it was a minority and now it's a majority, an 100%. Overwhelming majority, right? So it was a small minority, mm-hmm. and now it's an overwhelming majority of black people that are growing up without a father in the home. Yes. So that completely rewrites culture.
No, and I agree with you. And like I said, I'm all in favor of the single motherhood rate being an issue. What I'm saying is that sometimes I feel as though when people are making just the welfare argument that this is the only variable that contributed to the rise in single motherhood, we're having a very myopic perspective of what's going on because there's a myriad of factors. Because what's interesting that you make reference to is that you love Thomas Sowell. You like one of the guys that you mentioned a lot, and I really respect some of his writings. And Thomas Sowell has argued that in the 1980s under the Reagan administration, it's fair to say that welfare got cut. Right? It's fair to say that he was one of the presidents who actually made government smaller. But what you see as welfare decreased in the 80s, you also saw an increase in single motherhood, and also family structures were still corroding. So if the correlation is simply as welfare increases, single motherhood increases, then the inverse should be true as well. As welfare decreases, then single motherhood decreases.
Yeah, well, him rolling back welfare benefits, he didn't take welfare away from the people that had it. Do you get what I'm saying? So that's not gonna. I don't think that would change, especially in a short span of years. Like for a president can only be president for 8 years, right? Welfare policies that were started in the 60s are still exist today, right? So you can have one president that proliferates it, and you can have one president that wants to dial back on it. But they're not going into homes and saying now you're not getting food stamps.
No, I agree with you, but I guess what I'm saying is, and you said 60.
They didn't stop the incentivization of no fathers in home during that time.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I'm saying? So there was still an incentive to be a single mother. There was still an incentive. And when you're talking about that, you're talking about the diminishing, like they diminished the role of black men. I mean, I genuinely believe what what we're going through in terms of just the role of black men is an epidemic.
Of course. And so
that's so very true. I mean, because that was in effect then, and it's still in effect now. Like you hear women saying like, I don't know who I had a conversation with, and we were talking about like welfare, and housing and stuff like that, and that like literally on these applications you have to like they want to make sure that there is not a man in the home. Like you will lose your benefits if there is a man that comes back to live there or who lives there with you. Like for sure, you can get like a home, like a house, right on the government housing and take care of your children. You can get health insurance for them and stuff like that. But if there is another counterpart, if there is a man in the picture, then this can all go away. So it's like, well, we need the help. We're in a situation where we need the assistance, but like what's going to be more important? Am I going to take care of my children, or am I going to cultivate this relationship and like struggle and suffer with you? Unfortunately, a lot of women, not just, a small majority, a small portion of the women, a lot of the women will choose to go the easier route so that they don't have to necessarily struggle or stress in that same manner. So I think that is a very, very huge part to play, as well as, of course, incarceration, all types of, there's so many other things that have to play that are a part of that. But also, one of the biggest issues is that the seed was planted with the generations from before, and then they have kids, so they're raising children without a man. So then this child grows up and sees that it's normal that you can have a baby and not have the counterpart or not have the father in the home. He doesn't have to really deal with it, so they just have babies and they just keep perpetuating the same cycle over and over again as well, because all it really takes is one seed to be planted for them to keep going on and on and on, and for it to affect generation after generation, which is why a lot of people who were on welfare from back then, when they're talking about right now, if you look at their generations now, they're still in project housing, they're still on welfare now, because it's so much easier for them to keep doing what it is that they saw and find that as normal.
So I agree with you 110%. But what I was saying, like, it's a multivariable equation. So one thing that also happened was globalization, right? Second Great Migration occurred in the 1940s, where a lot of these blacks left the South. They went to where? Los Angeles. They went to Chicago. They went to Pittsburgh. They went to New York. They went to these cities for these different jobs. And a lot of black men went for service industry jobs. What happened in the late 70s, 80s, and 90s? The world changed, right?
That also happened way before, earlier in the progressive era, and it didn't change when they did that. The migration has happened more than once or twice. It also happened during the progressive era.
The first Great Migration, but then but the world didn't change though.
But that's my point, because welfare didn't exist. So I actually think, I'm not saying it's the only variable. I'm saying it's the biggest variable.
Okay.
So if you can look back and you say this migration has happened, the Great Migration first happened, during the progressive era, and nothing changed in terms of the family dynamic, that lets you know that the family was still intact.
Well,
right?
Things did change in the 1920s during the Great Depression. Single motherhood went up and broken marriages went up and across all communities in America, because what we see is that one of the biggest issues when it comes to marriages, as you and I both know, when you have financial instability in communities, you're going to have higher rates of single motherhood and higher rates of broken marriages. So during that period of time,
but slightly, you get what I'm saying? Slightly. I mean, if you're talking about, of course, if you look at any statistic and you're looking at it over time, you're going to see this. Right? During different times. I mean, case in point, during World War II, men were going overseas, they were being killed. There are all these different things that go like this. When you see this sharp increase, something's happened that started this. And this is what's happened after the 1960s, right?
Of course.
So, yes, there are tons of other small variables that can impact those things. And I agree with you that we could talk about any one of those elements and say this could have contributed, right? But when we're talking about, we're staying from, 11% to 18%, right? And then we're going from 23% to 77%. What was the big variable? And the big variable is welfare.
Welfare is one of the...
Marrying women to government.
But here's another interesting factor. So, also you have to...
Marrying women to government, that statement is tough. That's tough.
Into consideration shotgun marriages, right? So that's something also that happened as well. So basically what happened was a very interesting study. So in the year 1964, when they analyzed the black family, like you were saying, blacks were married at higher rates than whites. But still, at the same time, blacks had higher single motherhood rates than whites. So what they realized was that for a lot of black Americans, there was a cultural attitude where if you got a woman pregnant, right, the idea was you would marry them. So I hope you guys are following that.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden, the cultural attitudes changed.
It did.
In the 60s, right? You had second wave feminism. You had a lot of women becoming more into the workplace. You had a lot of different cultural attitudes that also contributed to it. So a lot of these women who were once single mothers, right, because single motherhood was steadily raising.
Hold on, before he finishes that thought. Sorry, guys. Sorry to interrupt in the middle of this very great breakdown that he's giving. That's such a true and crucial point, is that once women started going into the workforce, it became more of like, before when way back in the day, it was like you got this woman pregnant and she's going from the household with her parents and now she has to go into your care. So now you need to marry my daughter, you need to take care of my daughter, you need to provide for my daughter. So it was more of that like push to stay together, to keep the family together, and now you are her covering and you need to come get her basically. To now these women can work for themselves, it turns into like, well, you don't really need to marry him, or maybe let's see if you actually like him, let's see if you actually love him, let's see if you want to be with him for the long haul, let's see if you guys can get to know each other, or whatever the case is, because at the end of the day she can somehow fend for herself, and if she can't fend for herself, it goes back to the point of she can always get on like government housing and welfare.
In this period of time, a lot of these women who were single mothers who traditionally felt the obligation to get married, right? A lot of them, like you said, did quote unquote get married to the government, but a lot of them chose not to get married because of the disinvention of shotgun marriages as well as no fault divorce.
Right. I mean, listen, that now we're kind of getting into the space of feminism, and I'm also very
Of
opposed
course
to
you are.
feminism, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, like, I mean, you're exactly right that is another corollary, and I agree with you. And in terms of, you hear me speak about this often, trying to turn feminism, trying to make women aspire, turn women into men, turn men into women, saying if this shouldn't belong to men, women should want this too. I disagree with all of that. I think that resetting that has also contributed to the breakdown of family dynamics. That's also why I'm against the trans movement. Like, I mean, so don't think that I am only solely saying welfare. I'm saying it's the biggest contributor to the spike.
Yeah.
And then there are all these other elements, and you are correct that after the 60s, there was sort of this push, feminism, environmentalism, all of these isms started popping up after the 60s, and you can talk about how any of them have contributed to the breakdown. But the single biggest contributor for the Black community has been welfare, in my opinion. And then there's tons of other things that factor into it, and they're all things that I fight today. So you're not going to find a category where I'm like, oh, but I'm in support of that. I love I hate feminism. I think it's horrible. It needs to be thrown out. I'm not a feminist. I am one of the proudest non-feminists that there are. I believe there are roles, natural biological roles for men and natural biological roles for women. There's a reason that God designed it so that I can hold a baby and you can't hold a baby, right? And it allows you to do certain things that I can't do, and allows me to do things that you can't do. And both of those things should be celebrated as difficult tasks. Becoming a CEO of a company, it's a very hard task.
I agree.
Raising 3 good children is a very hard task.
I agree, 100,000%.
And there's a yin and there's a yang, and we're now in a society that's trying to foster a disruption of that yin and that yang. And who's going to hurt? Families. It's the breakdown of family. And so, yeah, I would almost say that there's almost this rapid this rapid approach to breaking down the family, and there are all of these things that are contributing to it now.
And so the reason why I wanted to bring that up is like,
love what she said. I love what she said. When you mess with that balance, that natural balance, right? That has always been, of course, you're going to see a lot of things going in disarray because the structure, the foundation is broken. It's not there. It's not the same anymore. So I agree with what she said.
because I feel as though when we understand what was causing this issue, then we can move forward to what were the solutions to the issue. So it was an interesting study that was done that said, okay, what happens is, okay, if welfare is the contributing factor, they were like, let's create new welfare incentives, saying that you have to get a job after 2 years on welfare.
Love it.
And so what ended up happening was, interesting thing happened. They found out that single motherhood rates increased, and also...
Wait, when did they make that a policy? I don't think that was a policy in America.
No, not in America. So do you know how like certain individual cities can do different things in regards to local governments can have flexibility for the welfare policies? So... What I forgot the city. I'll share it with you. I'm gonna put all these the citations in the footnotes. So an interesting study that was done, and they showed what happened was that this single motherhood rate actually increased, because what they found was that they were pushing people, different individuals, to saying that, okay, you have to get a job for, because we're not gonna be on welfare forever. So they were seeing that, okay, these women who got jobs post welfare, did that further incentivize them to get married and for them not to be single mothers? And what was interesting was a lot of these women still didn't get married because now the cultural attitude had shifted in the late 80s, 90s with the feminist movement, with a lot of the women power movement. So they felt like, I don't need a man.
Oh, yeah. So I don't want you to think that what I'm saying is that the solution is that if you took away welfare, suddenly everyone would start getting married. No.
And that's what I wanted to clarify for the audience.
Oh, yeah.
Because, like I said, my biggest thing when people think about what is the primary cause to the dissolution in the black family.
Cause and solutions are two different things.
Exactly. so my argument is it's a multivariate equation where there's so many things that took place. The death of the black leaders, death of King, death of Malcolm X. A lot of these things affected the black community as well. And so in regards to solutions, right, that's where I feel as though, okay, moving forward, right, we understand this is a problem. We can argue how we got here, but
married.
No, I have to drop this video in the I'm gonna drop the full video. I have to look for it in the description box or in the comment section somewhere. Just look for it. It's gonna be there because this is a really, really great conversation. And I want to say thank you for the person. Okay, the anonymous person who is obviously not anonymous between him and I, but who's in my DM who asked me to do this video, because I think it does bring light to the source of one of the biggest problems that we are having right now, and also one of the biggest problems that is probably going to be among us based off of all of these laws that are changing and stuff like that. So I think this was great. As we can see, once again, from where it started, there's so many different factors, so many different reasons as to why there has been a breakdown of our family structure, but it's up to us to change that for our future generations. And it's up to us, obviously, to raise our children in a world that is going to be more fruitful for them to grow and to multiply, and more of a safe space for them and for their development and for their growth, and it's going to take us to make that change again within our households so that our children can see better, so that they can go ahead and duplicate what they see, because in the past they duplicate what they've seen, but it's been one parent household, right? Single moms raising the children. So I think that's a very, very great conversation. Amazing conversation. I love the dialogue that the two of them had. They didn't agree on everything, but I loved both perspectives strongly, and again, this leads to a bigger point too. When you're in a relationship with somebody, you have to make sure that this is the person that you want your children to grow up and be. If you are a man and you see a woman that you would never want a daughter to grow up and be like her, you have to be mindful of that before you procreate with her. And as a woman, if you see a man that you cannot trust to lead you or to guide you, you should not procreate with that person. We have to create situations where people are actually knowing each other, vetting each other properly before they create an entire human being with this person. That way, a lot of these things will not even pertain to us anymore. A lot of these conversations wouldn't even matter for us anymore. So we definitely have to, of course, be the change that we want to see. So thank you guys so much for watching. Hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and hit that notification bell. I do post a video every single day. That time varies, but if you hit that subscribe button and that notification bell, it will notify you every time that I post. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Love you.